Okay. Sorry, everyone, for that technical hitch. I'm sure we'll be able to manage as we go. Okay. As John introduced me, my name is Purity Kamande. I'm a sports nutritionist. I'm currently practicing here within Kenya. So for today, we'll be able to touch on a few elements of sports nutrition, or basically healthy eating when it comes to sports and performance. So as we go along, I'll go through the presentation. If you have any questions, you can raise them through the chat box. Then I think we'll be able to address them once the presentation is over. So we'll be able, the contents for this presentation will be able just to be able to look at what is healthy eating, first of all, nutrition in sports and why nutrition in sports. We'll also touch on supplements, and we'll also shortly touch on doping as we go along as an emerging trend when it comes to nutrition and in current sports currently. So we will start by just looking at what is healthy eating, or what constitutes of, when people talk of healthy eating, what is it that they necessarily refer to? So healthy eating is usually taken care of by a few principles when it comes to nutrition. So we have what we refer to as the A, B, C, D, M, and V of healthy eating. So the first one is what we refer to as adequate. When we're talking about a healthy diet, or when you're talking about healthy eating, we ask ourselves the question, adequate. Adequate in referrals to, is it enough when it comes to taking care of one's personal needs that are your energy needs to be able for you to do any activity from day to day? Then it has to be adequate in terms of quantity, in terms of nutrients, to take you through your day's activities and any extras that may come along. Balance has to do with, are you getting enough in terms of the various nutrients that exist in terms of the various food groups that are there? So we have a number of food groups or that are currently there that you are supposed to take when it comes to your daily intake of food. We have also the nutrients. So nutrients and food groups are used interchangeably, but you'll allow me to use nutrients in this particular case. So when we talk of nutrients, you're talking about the building blocks of when it comes to your food. So we have the carbohydrates, we have the protein, we have the fats and oils, we have the vitamins, we have the mineral salts, we have the fiber, and we have the water. So those are the nutrients that constitute what we are supposed to eat from day to day. So when we're talking about balance, or what people constantly refer to as balanced diet, are you getting enough of these nutrients in what you are partaking in your dietary intake? Then the other thing is calorie density. Calorie density has to do with, is the amount you're taking able to take care of your needs at that particular time? When we talk about foods that are calorie dense, we usually refer to quantity in this case. You don't need to eat a lot of food, but the food that you're eating in that small quantity packs a lot of calories. Calories in this case is a unit of energy that we use in nutrition. And people constantly, when they're talking about food, when they're talking about nutrition, you'll hear the term calories being thrown around. So when you talk of calorie as a term of energy, we are talking about foods that you're able not to eat a lot of, but they can be able to provide you with enough calories to get you through an activity. When we talk of foods that are calorie dense, we are referring to things like nuts. You don't need to eat a lot of nuts to be able to get a lot of calories. A handful of nuts is usually just enough to be able to take you through at least an activity lasting you 20 to 30 minutes. And you don't need to eat like a whole half a kg of it. Also, we also talk about, sometimes you can take a meal, add something to it to make it calorie dense. For example, oats, when we add yogurt, when we add fruits, when we add nuts in some cases to oats, you don't need to eat a lot of that to be able to take care of your calories. Then the other one we have is nutrient density as another principle of healthy eating. Nutrient density has to do with foods that we eat, one food that you can eat that can be able to provide you with various nutrients. For example, a common meal that we eat here in Kenya, like githeri. Githeri is a nutrient-dense meal, depending on how you prepare it. But already when it's in itself, okay, you can get maize providing you with carbohydrates, protein, giving you your protein coming from the beans itself. If you decide to add potatoes, then you're also getting extra carbohydrates. If you decide to add your carrots, your tomatoes, then you're also getting other vitamins and minerals as well. Moderated has to do with just enough quantities for you as an individual or to take care of your needs at that particular time. So that's what we are talking about, moderation. Everything in moderation, not excessive, not too little, just the right amount. Then variety has to do with changing up what you eat on a day-to-day basis. You're not eating the same meals every other day. So you're changing them up so that you can be able to get the benefits of other meals that you're eating. So that has to do with variety. So those are the principles that usually guide what healthy eating is, and they set a basis or a foundation when it comes to your day-to-day food or day-to-day dietary intake. So that's basically what healthy eating is. So when we talk of nutrition in sports, this is something, sports cannot work without nutrition. Nutrition is very, very important. And this is because you'll find that some healthy eating choices or healthy food choices usually have very key impact when it comes to performance, in that number one, they'll allow the athlete to explore their maximum potential in terms of endurance, in terms of speed, and in terms of recovery, especially of muscles. So you will find if it is not healthy, if it is not within the right parameters, then this will have an issue. Then again, nutrition knowledge, we found that is often not a priority for some people. And this is something studies have been done, and it has been found that nutrition knowledge in most of our athletes, most of our athletic support staff is usually on the lower side. And it has been found it's not a priority. People tend to put nutrition on the side. And this is usually ends up having a lot of misinformation when it comes to dietary practices, which in turn affects exercise and athletic performance. So you will find that nutrition for athletes is usually an all-year consideration, it being either during pre-season period, it being during the on-season or the competition period, and post-season, which now goes to when we are slowing down, which allows now for recovery from the competition season. So you'll find that during these 3 seasons, nutrition is usually very key, even as it changes up during the same way training changes up during these seasons, the same way nutrition changes up during these seasons. So we ask ourselves, why sports nutrition? Number one is that it enhances performance. You cannot be able to go through an activity if your nutrition is not right. If your nutrition is not able to take care of you an activity, you will find that you end up getting easily fatigued, which leads to my next point, which is that nutrition helps to decrease fatigue. Given the various sports that are there, the power sports, the endurance sports, all this, they usually require nutrition to be able to avoid the early onset of fatigue. Also, the right nutrition helps to reduce the risk of disease and injury. We usually say an athlete is a human being before they're an athlete. So if their nutrition is not right, then exposes them to higher risk of getting illnesses. Then when you add on the additional exercise, the additional training, then you will find that if the nutrition is not right, then risk to injury and risk to disease goes even higher. So if nutrition is taken care of in the right parameters, then we are reducing this risk. Also optimizing training, especially with adaptations that come in during training, then we are enabling our athletes to be able to optimize, because nutrition enables or it facilitates metabolic adaptation that comes in during training. Also speeds up recovery after training. This is very key. After an activity, after training, after a competition, it should be that an athlete or whoever is taking care of these athletes is able to encourage them to eat the right way, to be able to get in their recovery setting in. Because if recovery is not checking in within the right time, then it will definitely affect coming on training, successive training sessions, successive competitions, which might affect performance in the end. So that's why sports nutrition is something that has to be taken care of as importantly as other factors that come in during training, that come in during performance, as in sports. So when we talk about some of the important nutrients, especially when it comes to sports, I just narrowed down to a few. We have all nutrients are very important. I just narrowed down to a few which are general. So we have the protein. Protein usually helps to maintain blood glucose, especially in increased duration activities that usually proceed from 30 minutes and beyond. Then protein usually comes in to help maintain blood glucose, which is where the energy of the body is coming from in this increased duration activity. Fats as well provide energy in activities that take longer periods of time. So you will find that the body turns to fat to provide energy. That's why even as we ask our athletes to consume food, even if they're decreasing their fat intake, fat is still very important, because you'll also find there are some vitamins that cannot be taken by the body in the absence of fat. So fat is a very important nutrient as well when it comes to performance. Calcium for optimum bone health, for normal enzyme activity. There are some activities at the enzyme level that cannot take place in the absence of calcium. Also, muscle contraction, calcium plays a very key role when it comes to this. We also have vitamin D, which we get mostly freely from the sun. This is usually we see a lot of vitamin D issues, especially with athletes who do a lot of indoor sporting activity. So we encourage them to get at least an hour of sun in, because vitamin D is equally important, especially when it comes to bone health. So vitamin D and calcium go hand in hand. So also for the absorption and regulation of calcium, for calcium to be taken up by your body, for it to be regulated within the body itself, then vitamin D has to be present. Also, iron, another very important mineral salt when it comes to performance. You'll find that it aids with oxygen delivery to tissues. You'll find that also iron aids when it comes to supporting growth. This is very key, especially when you're dealing with adolescent athletes, when you're dealing with athletes that are just moving from the adolescent age into the adult age. Iron is usually very important. Also, you'll find that iron increases blood volume and also aids, especially when it comes to taking care of lean muscle mass. Iron is a very important nutrient. Again, carbohydrates also, which is the first line of energy when it comes to providing the body with energy for your day-to-day activities. For some sporting activities, carbohydrates will be the primary source of energy. So those are some of the nutrients that are very important when it comes to sporting activities. So we talk about meal timing and its benefits. So meal timing, I know for some of us who have been athletes before or have been coaches for a long period of time, I'm sure you've come across this term. Meal timing basically is when we are consuming meals to be able to get them to optimize their performance when it comes to fueling a particular activity or a particular sport. So we usually divide it into three main parts. So we have the pre-game, we have the during the game, and we have the post-game. So meal timing benefits are usually mostly during the competition or during the actively training session. So you will find that a well-planned pre-game provides energy for both the muscles and the brain. So this is the meal that is taken before the game. Depending on what type of game you're dealing with, or what type of sport or what type of activity you're dealing with, this is a meal that is consumed before the game. So aids in providing energy, because if energy is not present for the muscles, for the brain, then you will find that the athlete is not able to perform at their best. So the importance of the pre-game meal is that it increases endurance, it increases their speed, it increases their power, and also their mental sharpness and clarity for sporting activities that need coordination, that need clarity and all that. The pre-game meal comes in very handy. So you will find that some athletes have been practicing that they starve or they avoid taking a meal before a game. This is usually discouraged because it tends to cause quicker fatigue for an athlete. It ends up causing increased injury risk for an athlete because the body is then forced to use up with that which is not there or turning to stores which are not adequate. So you will find that they cannot go through an activity completely because they are lacking in the right energy for their muscles and for the brain as well. So different sports have various time parameters that this pre-game meal should be taken. Some sports will do 2 to 3 hours. Some sports will say 30 minutes to 1 hour. So this again is dependent on the sport, dependent on the athlete again, and dependent on the type of activity or training that an athlete is engaging in. Then the other one is that during the game, when a game is actively going on. So timing for this, or the benefits of this, is that it's able to provide fuel, especially for prolonged workout periods. Prolonged workout periods, here we are looking at anything going beyond 45 minutes. Then we need to be able to give our athletes a meal during this time. And meal does not necessarily mean a whole main meal sitting down with your rice, with your chicken, with your veggies. No, there are various meals that we are able to use up. So it could either be a shake, which could either be a sports drink that they are partaking, or a gel that they are taking during a game that is able to provide them with fuel during a prolonged workout. And this enables the muscles, or prevents the muscles from getting fatigued very quickly, and provides the muscles with more energy for workouts lasting for longer than 1 hour. As you can see, as I have mentioned, you can try sports foods or sports drinks containing carbohydrates, 6 to 8% that are currently there in the market, and also those that have electrolytes, just to be able to avoid electrolyte imbalances as they are actively participating in an activity. Then we have the post-game meal. This is usually after an activity or after a competition or after a game. This usually helps with refueling properly after a workout, and it usually helps with restoring that which has been used or depleted during an activity. Also helps with preventing onset of muscle soreness and increases muscle building. This is where we mentioned the adaptations that have been taken care of by training. The post-game meal helps with this. Also, it usually, post-game meal is very important because it helps with recovery from the training. So that's why it's very important to encourage our athletes to have a meal after. Okay, examples, I see a question. Examples of local pre-game foods. You could have oats, you could have various fruits, you could have yogurt. The fruits that we encourage a lot during pre-game are things like bananas, watermelon, okay? You could also have like a protein shake whereby you're using yogurt, adding a few berries here and there. Again, if tolerable for the athlete, those also work as good pre-game meals. And as I mentioned earlier, this will also sometimes be individualized depending on the kind of sport and the kind of sport timing activity that you're dealing with. So for sporting activities, let me use example of a triathlon. For example, with how much time a triathlon, we usually have to break the pre-game meal into two, whereby they have the main meal 2 to 3 hours before, then they have another sort of a pre-game snack. This where you could have your nuts, your peanuts, you could have dried fruit in the form of raisins as a form of a pre-game meal. I hope that question is answered. So for the post game, you could do a protein shake. You could also do slices of bread, do your peanut butter, do your jelly, a banana as well, a melon as well, also very good as post-game meals or as post-game fruits, instead of turning to deep fried foods, which might not be taken up by the body properly, especially after an intense activity like a competition. So that has to do with meal timing and the benefits of this. So meal planning in sports. So meal planning, especially, this usually starts pre-competition or pre-season, whereby now we have done our assessment of the athlete after they have come from recovery or post-season. They're now getting into the season, whereby we have done your assessment being your anthropometries, you have done your dietary assessment. Now you want to come up with a plan or a meal plan that an athlete will be able to follow during the various seasons. That's the pre-season, the competition season, and the post-season as the training needs change. So as we have just seen, timing is very important. What time are they taking their meals in lieu with the training that is going on? Then we also advise that you ask your athletes not to experiment with new foods on competition day, because most of the time you will find that some of these new foods end up having gastric intestinal issues, and this might affect the performance. It's also advised, especially when athletes are traveling outside the country or outside the region, to stick to foods that they're familiar with. They don't end up experimenting with new foods because, again, of the risk of some of the gastrointestinal issues, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea that may come in as a result of experimenting with these new foods. Again, we ask that they eat a main meal at least a minimum of 3 hours before an event, so that at least by the time an event or the competition is taking place, the food or the stomach has been able to be cleared. Sometimes we get to see that, like for example, a game is starting at 1 o'clock or at 12 midday. Then you find that at 11 is when an athlete is sitting down to eat the ugali, meat, and cabbage. Obviously, the performance of this athlete will be affected because they'll still be very full. The body has not been able to break down this food to provide energy for the event, so it will end up affecting their performance. We advise that high fiber foods should be limited, especially during an activity or during a competition day. We try to limit on the high fiber foods. High fiber foods, if I give an example of the local foods that we have here in Kenya, for example, the whole grain flours for ugali, for chapati, we try and avoid that during active competition days. High fatty meals should be avoided again before exercise because of the gastrointestinal issues that they could bring, especially during a competition day. Then pre-game liquids meals before an event, at least 1 hour, then that would be adequate for an athlete and ends up not having any issues for them. So supplements, this is something that most coaches are currently weighing, or we find ourselves on a weighing scale when it comes to the use of supplements, especially in this day and age of doping. So what are supplements? Supplements usually are products that tend to contain unusual amounts, unusual being that they tend to contain very concentrated amounts of nutrients or other components of foods that normally would be obtained from food alone. You will find that many sports supplements have the placebo effect. Placebo effect is basically an effect that is more of a psychological than physiological. It is what if someone believes if I take a certain product X, it works best for me. And you will find that this is not really in evidence. It is not yet been studied. That's why we are saying more of a psychological than a physiological effect. You will find with a lot of these supplements currently in the market, most of them lack the scientific evidence to support the marketing claims. Like any product, that's what supplements have. They come with all these claims that they do this, but there's really no scientific evidence to this. And that's also, when it comes to scientific evidence, this again informs when we talk of classification of sports supplements, then scientific evidence plays a very big role when it comes to this. So that allows me now to go to my next slide, which has to do with classification of supplements. When we talk of classification of supplements, this was basically developed by the AIS, Australian Institute of Sport, whereby it is based on scientific evidence and other practical considerations that usually determine where a product, in this case supplements, is either safe, legal, or effective at improving sporting and athletic performance. So we have what we refer to as the A, B, C categorization of sports supplements. So we have Group A. Group A supplements usually present with strong scientific evidence for use in specific situations in sports. And this is usually the use of these supplements is guided by evidence-based protocols. So these are supplements that studies have been done and passed along, and they are now, these studies have now created what we are referring to as evidence-based protocols for their use. They're permitted for use, but according to best practice protocols. However, I should give a disclaimer that currently we are adopting what we refer to as the food first model. Food first model has to do with if we can get all that we need from the food, then supplements are not necessary because of the risk of doping, which I'll come to shortly. So some of the supplements that fall under the Group A supplements have to do with multivitamins, caffeine, which we get from our coffee, creatinine, and beta-alanine, which are some of the proteins that are usually presenting as some of the supplements. Then we have Group B supplements. These are supplements that there's still ongoing research, there's still ongoing studies being done about this group of supplements, and you will find that with this, then it is considered for use of these supplements is guided by either it is under a research protocol or a case managed protocol where you have a professional monitoring you as you use the supplements. So these supplements include vitamin C supplements, collagen supplements, fish oil supplements. So if one has to take this, then it should be under protocol that is gotten from an ongoing research protocol or a case managed individualized protocol. So that has to do with Group A and B. So these two groups are usually what is considered within the safer area, and we'll come to that shortly. Then we have Group C supplements. So in this, you will find that scientific evidence is not supportive of claimed benefits. So when these supplements are being released into the market, they come with all these claims that they'll do this and this, they'll do this and this for the athlete. So Group C supplements, you'll find evidence is not supportive of these claims amongst athletes, or yet there has been no research that has been undertaken to guide these informed opinions. So they are not advocated for use by athletes. So I've given a few examples. So we have tyrosine, we have what we refer to as branch-chained amino acids. An example of this is leucine and some prebiotics that are currently in the market. You will find that with research ongoing every other day, some of these supplements that are now in Group C are previously those that were in Group B. So with research changing every day, then some of them switch up between the groups. Then we have now Group D supplements. So Group D supplements are banned substances or that are very high risk of contamination with substances that could lead to a positive drug test. So they are not recommended for use by athletes at all or in whatever case. This is usually in line with the World Anti-Doping Agency list of banned substances that is released at least every year. Some examples of this includes herbal stimulants, for example, cat, or what is commonly referred to here in Kenya as miraa. So they are completely banned. So an athlete should not use this. Also, another example would be cannabis derivatives, bang derivatives. THC is not recommended, which has been banned. So these particular groups, C and D, should not be used by athletes in whatsoever because either they are banned, high risk of contamination, or there is no research to back the claims that have been released with these supplements. So that has to do with categorization of supplements. So then as we talk about supplements, we talk again about doping. So what is doping? I know by now for most of us, we have heard of this and we know of the current situation that is happening in our country, in the region and globally when it comes to doping. So doping refers to the use of banned substances in competitive sports to give the athlete an unfair advantage over fellow competitors. So you will see that doping usually comes in either by consuming what we refer to as performance enhancing substances, which are usually drugs used to improve athletic performance. Doping is unethical and is prohibited by most sporting organizations. For example, like here in Kenya, we have the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya, which I know most of us or some are adhering to what they are currently telling us, availing our athletes for random testing. So you will find that with doping, then an athlete's health is also compromised because of the health risks that usually come in with doping. So some common substances that are used in doping include anabolic steroids. Steroids has to be one of the key. When you talk about steroids, then doping usually comes to the mind of anyone who knows about it. So these are usually substances which are used in increasing muscle mass and physical strength. And this is usually seen a lot in bodybuilding, weightlifting, power sports. This is where we have a lot of people taking anabolic steroids. Also, another category of performance enhancing substances has to do with stimulants, which end up increasing excitement, decreasing a sensation of fatigue, and this is usually seen mostly in endurance sports. So we also have other substances or other forms of doping. This include hormones. Some hormones can be taken to give the athletes having a doping effect, giving them an unfair advantage. We have people engaging in blood doping, and recently now we have even seen people engaging in gene doping. So how do we reduce the risk when it comes to supplementation and doping? So I hope we can be able to see that small diagram that is on the slide there. So we have from the green to the red. So from the green is where we would want everyone to remain. No use of supplements, then it poses no risk to the athletes themselves. So this is what I was talking about, the food first model, whereby we are taking or we are able to get everything that we need from what we are consuming, from the food that we consume without having to take supplements. So if you're not taking a supplement, then you're not at risk, because this is the only way to avoid coming into contact with some of the contaminated supplements. So here we are basically focusing on a healthy and balanced diet, which takes you back to what we were talking about earlier, what constitutes a healthy diet. Then we have the low risk. This is whereby if the use of a supplement is recommended by a specialist, either a physician or a sports nutritionist or dietitian, whereby they're recommending what they know is best, and they're opting for products that are independently certified. So because some of these supplements, we are not too sure of where they're coming from, then we usually sometimes you have to be sent for independent testing. Yes, Coach T, yes, I see what you're saying exactly. So most of them will be contaminated. So that's why we avoid that. So unless it is really necessary, some of this will usually be sent to an independent lab to be tested to confirm that they are safe for use. Then we have the medium risk. This is whereby, so when we talk of the low risk, we are talking about category group A and group B supplements, which have been tested and have evidence to back their use. Then we have the exclusion criteria for the medium risk. So this is something whereby unless now maybe because of an existing condition, then an athlete has to use them. So for safety reasons, it is best to avoid these substances because again, the high risk of contamination, and again, avoid ordering products or supplements from sources that aren't certified. For example, websites that are not certified, just going on the web because a supplement says this and you think it's good for your athlete. No, if it is not a certified product or a certified source, then it is best to avoid them. Then we have those that we call the high risk. These are your group C and group D supplements. So we say avoid these products at all costs. And these are products mostly that are intended for the fitness and bodybuilding market. You will find a range of these a lot in the market. Then you will find that products which make big claims. These are products that that come with all these claims saying they do this, they do that for the athlete. Then also products that use terms such as testo, anabo, andro, boost. Please try and stay clear of such products. Then we have products which claim to be doping free, or products which say they are WADA certified. As of now, WADA is an independent body that does not certify certain things. That's why you will find that now using athletes, then they are able to send using labs to be able to certify them. So that has to do with reducing the risk of contamination or reducing the risk of doping, especially when it comes to consuming supplements. So that marks the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for everyone for listening to me. So I'll take on questions now. That anyone might have with regard to what we have just talked about.
Sorry, Purity, you just only want to take one?
No, I have time to take on questions. So anyone who has a question, I can be able to answer.
Anyone with any concern or any clarification that you need from Purity? Okay, maybe I can ask or seek for clarification.
Yes.
Afternoon, John.
Afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Purity.
Good afternoon to you too.
Alex from Botswana.
Okay.
You were talking about the herbal supplementation, which I heard you just talking about things like marijuana. So I wanted to understand, because there are some supplements nowadays that are herbal made, not necessarily inclusive of marijuana.
Yes.
Are they low or medium risk?
I was just giving marijuana as an example. So with herbal supplements, these usually fall in the category of medium to high risk. So if we can stay clear of them, then it is best. So try stay clear of them because of the medium to high risk that they usually have of contamination, especially during production.
Oh, okay. No, thank you.
You're welcome.
Purity, you said it's usually, or it's advisable to have your meal 1 to 2 hours before competition.
Yes.
Does this involve all types of food, or there are specific foods that you can take within that duration? Like you see, sometimes you're told that's a heavy meal. Do not take heavy meal before the competition. So does the duration applies in all, or in just a few?
So when we talk about the timing of the pre-game meals, it would go back to of sporting activity and the type of food. So you will find some sporting activities would require one to have the heavier meal 2 to 3 hours before the activity. For example, a heavy something like if you have to eat like your chicken or your ugali and your chicken or beef or whatever, come 2 to 3 hours before a meal. Then if you're now coming closer, avoid now the athlete being in quote unquote like a hunger state before the competition. So like 1 hour before the competition, they could have something like a snack, something like a small cup of yogurt, a 250 ml cup of yogurt with a banana, or a small cup of oats with a banana, all that, or fermented or berries or nuts that could easily be able to provide them with the energy that they would need an hour going into competition. So the various type of food would now be what we are looking at again with timing again. I hope I have answered your question, John.
Yeah, you have. Is sometimes there are sports that are weight regulated.
Mm,
So
yes.
you'll find an athlete going hungry or for quite a long time until they
Yes.
for their weight, go for their weighing in. So you see, after weighing in,
The
they're given
weigh-in
like,
is done. Yeah.
yes, it depends on sports. Some sports, maybe 2 hours competition, some are 1 hour competition. So if these athletes have been fasting, taking a lot of, going for a long time without food, just at weight, is how could you advise on how somebody can resume taking in food, in a way that it will not affect them? Because usually somebody is so hungry that they want to eat everything and anything just to be fine for the competition. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, now the type of also will inform the type of meal that they have, and again the timing of the meal that they will have.
All right.
So I can see questions being raised on the chat box by Lefai. I hope I got that right. Why so many products from the market of promises when they could actually be contaminated or banned or bringing so much false information? Okay. So to answer the supplement market, especially within is highly unregulated. You will, I was saying the African market is not regulated. So that's why you'll find people coming in with a lot of supplements, people importing these supplements and selling them. So that's why we have so many supplements, unregulated, all this false information. So that lack of regulation is where the problem comes in. So if we compare, for example, the African situation to the European and American situation where they have more regulations, then that's where the problem comes in. So if regulations would come in to take care of supplements, because it's usually a back and forth, who regulates it? Is it the health side? Is it the sporting side? So so that back and forth is now where all these problems comes in. So it falls back to regulation. It would be perfect if it would be regulated, then some of these things, especially like the contaminations and the claims, would be taken care of because they would have to present with the evidence. But now that's where we are currently. Okay, so I also see another question. Can you briefly touch on nutrition during injury and rehabilitation? Okay, I think this is a very wide topic that would, I think, need a whole other webinar. So, so nutrition during injury and recovery would go again back to type of injury and also hand in hand with the type of rehabilitation that the athlete is going through. So if time allows, then we can do this, then we can be able to, if maybe it can be organized in a subsequent webinar, then maybe we could touch things on this. But if anyone would need help on this, I can easily share my contact, then we can be able to tackle that as well. Okay, I see another question. Daktari, Coach T, I'm getting you to just in a few. Or during a game, what quantities can be recommended? And the same, water intake, how much of this can be taken in? So again, when you're talking about quantities, it would depend with the athletes themselves. So the athletes themselves being that what is their current situation like what are their current needs. Then also quantities could either be anything from a handful to a sizable bowl, a small bowl of around 100 grams. So it would depend with the type of sport. And then again, water intake, hydration. I know we didn't talk about hydration. So with hydration, then hydration in sports is dependent on a few things. One is dependent on the needs of the athletes. Two is dependent on the type of activity that they're dealing with. And also number three, the type of environment that they are working in. So for example, we have the general, like when we're talking about an athlete, what we refer to like their weight. The weight of an athlete easily determines the hydration that they take. Hydration here, we're not only referring to water, we are referring to water and sports drinks that may be taking during an activity or during training. So what is the weight of an athlete? That will inform how much hydration or how much water that they need to take during training or during an activity. Also, the type of activity, timing. Is it a short period activity, like 30 minutes, or is it like a football match, a 90 minutes activity broken into two halves of 45, or is it like a full-on rugby game, 15th game, 80 minutes broken into 40 minutes, 40 minutes. So with that, then that would inform how much water that they will need to take. So we have different parameters that we use and various quantities that we use depending on the sport. Then that would inform now how much water that they'll need to take. Again, as I said, the third one would be the environment that the athlete is working in. If they're working out or training in a very hot and humid environment, that definitely would mean that their hydration would have to be their basic hydration would have to be have something added onto it to take care of the how much water or how much excretion they're losing, how much fluid they're losing through sweat. Because we also, when we're talking about hydration, you also have to take care of the sweat rate of the athlete as well. So you will find hot and humid environments will need more water intake compared to colder environments. Okay. Yes, let me get to you. Who was raising your hand?
Yeah, there's Abdul and Harrison.
Yes.
So I can go first. I'm Harrison.
Yes.
So I have this hypothesis. I don't know whether it's true. I've seen most, I'm in the basketball space. So I've realized that teams that come from Nairobi and they go to Mombasa, they tend to lose most of their games. And my hypothesis is that they have just poor game day meal planning. When they eat, say, at 12 noon or 1 p.m.,
Yeah.
the game is at 4, then they have to warm up. It's like they deplete their energy from the food they eat, even just during the warm up and the first quarter of the game. Could that be true? And if so, how do we advise them then to program well for their meal take? Because even when they take water during game, the water takes time to be absorbed in the body.
Okay. So that's why we usually recommend, especially when you're traveling out of an area that is new to you, like for example, Nairobi to Mombasa, we usually, if allowed, that the team can go 5 days earlier so that they may be able to acclimatize to that environment. And acclimatization also includes nutrition. People would think acclimatization just has to do with training. No, acclimatization also has to take care of nutrition. So like during game day, then we can be able to see, even when they have, if a game is at 4 and they have their last main meal, then we can be able to sports foods, things like the sports drink. For example, in such a situation, then we advise that they just go alone, they get drinks. We have sports drinks that usually contain certain amounts of carbohydrates, the allowed limits that can be able to provide them taking care of their hydration as well, but also taking care of their energy. So this is something that we would ask if more coaches can advocate for not just water alone, but sports drinks which have been permitted, which contain electrolytes, which use a lot in sweat, and this amount of carbohydrates which can be viable with the energy need during the ball game.
Thank you.
Abdul
Okay.
can proceed.
Um,
Abdul had his hand raised up. I don't know, there's still.
okay. I also, Coach T also had a question.
Yeah, not particular question. First, I have to say a wonderful report and very informative. And I only want to add something about my experience when I come to Africa and my experience what I have here in Europe, where we also have the problem with contaminated supplements. Especially in proteins. I wrote a short comment in the chat that especially protein products made in China are highly contaminated with steroids or other products which are similar to steroids. So yeah, this is what we avoid. But this is also not a very regulated market. We have an institute which is testing. It's in Cologne, and it's called. No, it's not called. They make a list. It's called the Cologne list of nutritions and supplements. And when our athletes, which are starting and competing for Germany, so our top athletes, if they want to be sure not to get any contaminated food, they take special products which are on this list made from this institute in Cologne. Because if you go on the open market, you may get something contaminated, and it's the duty of the athlete to prove that he hasn't doped, and which is very hard to do. Yeah? So what we do here in Germany is we give lists or information about the nutrients which are in the food, because number one question of high performance athletes is, how can I get more muscles? Where can I get more proteins? And we found out that there are special cheese or food which contains more proteins per kilogram than all these powders and special built supplements contains. And from this moment, the selling of these special products lowers, but the selling of these normal cheese, which contains 11 gram per kilogram of pure protein, this rises. So I want to ask you if there is any kind of list in Kenya, in this beautiful country I experienced last year for 3 weeks with the beautiful people there. So if there's any list where athletes and coaches can see which local product, local food contains how much carbohydrates, proteins, minerals, and all that stuff. Is there a list or is it planned? So this would be really helpful.
Okay, so in Kenya currently, similar to what you're talking about, the Cologne list, what we use here is we have what we refer to as the Kenya food composition tables. So it has a list of all the locally available foods and their nutrition information broken down from macro level up to micro level. So and anyone who's making a plan can go and check and compare what foods would best work. So that's usually what we use when we're doing plans. We go back to what we refer to, as I said, the Kenya food composition tables, So it has all this list broken down: protein, carbs, what, all the mineral salts and the vitamins that you could think about. It has all that. So it's almost similar to that. And I know currently they're working on an update come August, just to be able, so other foods that have come up because of research. So currently we have a lot of insect-based foods that are coming up. So I know there's an update that is supposed to be done to include those as well.
This is really helpful for all the coaches and athletes, because when I'm in contact with my friends in Nairobi or Mombasa, these are questions always, coach, what can I eat? What should I eat?
Yeah,
And I know what I would eat here in Germany, but I know you don't have the same products, or maybe you have the same, but all different. So such a list is brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other question or any other concern, or anyone else who would need a clarification? Okay, so I think I'll give it back to you, James.
John or James? John.
John,
Thank
sorry.
Thank you so much, Purity, for such a great presentation. I believe we've learned quite a lot from you in terms of the types of supplements, types of foods, doping, how to handle doping issues. And it's good you've also shared your contacts in case anyone would like to reach out to you for advice in terms of food and, nutrition. So we really appreciate your time. And as you've said, you could be able to provide another webinar on injury during nutrition during rehabilitation. So we're looking forward to that. And if there is not anybody or anyone else with any concern, then we'll just bring this webinar to end. Is there anyone with anything else to add?
Maybe me.
Yes, kindly.
Because there was a question about how much water has to be taken in, and how to if an athlete is losing water during the game, how much should be taken in. So what I do is, during training, I put them on a Libra before the training and after the training. So we measure how much sweat they are losing. And this should be the amount for the athletes to drink, or at least half of the amount during the game. Not all of it, might be a little bit too much for the stomach. So at least half of it, and containing carbohydrates or electrolytes or whatever. So this might be just an idea, an add-on for the guy who asked this question about losing sweat and to gain in some water again, some liquids. Just use a Libra before and after the training, and then you know exactly from each athlete how much they lose, because it's also different, it's individual. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I've just posted something on the chat that in case you didn't receive a direct invite and you'd like to receive a direct invite, just put your number on the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much, Purity, and we're looking forward to having you again next time. And
Thank you so much for having me as well. Looking forward to the next session.
Welcome. Okay, you're free to leave. I'm just waiting for the numbers so that I can end the meeting.
Thank you very much, and have a good time and a good weekend in Kenya. Bye-bye from Germany.